Please subscribe to my channel and like a video. Let's start the video. A weak puppy left to die is adopted by a kind woman and becomes a hero police dog, and then, written with raw emotion and vivid humanity, the rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the cracked pavement of a desolate alleyway just outside of town. Amid the puddles and discarded trash, a tiny shivering lump of fur lay curled up beside a rusted dumpster. The puppy was barely bigger than a loaf of bread, his patchy gray coat matted with mud and blood. His breaths were shallow, ragged, each one a quiet plea to keep going despite the odds. His mother was gone, likely hit by a car or taken by hunger, and his litter mates hadn't made it through the cold night. He was alone, too weak to whimper, too small to fight the inevitable. That's where Sarah found him. Sarah was 34, a woman with tired eyes and a heart that had been bruised more times than she cared to count. She'd been walking home from her shift at the diner, her umbrella doing little against the storm, when she heard it, a faint, broken sound, like a hiccup carried on the wind. She stopped, her sneakers squishing in the wet, and peered into the alley. At first, she thought it was nothing, just the rain playing tricks. But then she saw him, a trembling speck of life, abandoned and fading fast. "Oh, honey," she whispered, crouching down. Her voice cracked as she reached out, her fingers hovering over his frail body. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared up at her with glassy amber eyes that seemed to say, "I'm done." Sarah's chest tightened. She'd lost her own dog, Max, to cancer 6 months ago, and the wound was still raw. She wasn't sure she could do this again, love something that might break her all over. But as the rain soaked through her jacket and the puppy let out a pitiful wheeze, she knew she couldn't walk away. She scooped him up, cradling him against her chest. He was so light, like a handful of feathers, and cold, so cold. "You're coming with me," she said, her voice fierce now, as if daring the universe to argue. She hurried home, the storm raging around her, and burst into her small apartment, dripping and breathless. She grabbed a towel, an old heating pad, and a can of tuna, anything to give him a chance. She named him Scout because he looked like he'd been scouting for a miracle. For 3 days, Scout teetered on the edge. Sarah barely slept, feeding him milk through a dropper, wiping his tiny face with a warm cloth, whispering to him through the long nights. "You're a fighter, Scout. You've got this." She didn't know if she was convincing him or herself, but on the 4th day, he lifted his head, lapped at the milk with a shaky tongue, and let out a small, triumphant bark. Sarah cried then, big, messy sobs that shook her whole body. He was going to make it. Scout grew fast, his scrawny frame filling out into a lanky German Shepherd mix, with a coat that turned sleek and silver gray. His eyes stayed amber, sharp and soulful, and he followed Sarah everywhere, her shadow, her heartbeat. She'd sit on her sagging couch after a double shift, and he'd rest his head on her knee, gazing up at her like she'd hung the moon. "You saved me too, you know," she'd murmur, scratching behind his ears. And she meant it. Scout gave her purpose, a reason to keep going when the world felt heavy. One day, while walking Scout through the park, Sarah noticed a police K9 unit training nearby. The dogs were disciplined, powerful, darting through obstacle courses and sniffing out hidden objects. Scout's ears perked up, his tail wagging like a metronome. A gruff officer, Sergeant Mike Torres, caught her watching. "He's got a good build," Mike said, nodding at Scout. "Ever think about training him?" Sarah laughed, brushing it off. "He's just my buddy. He's not cut out for that." But Mike saw something in Scout, a spark, an intensity, and handed her his card. "If you change your mind, we could use a dog like him." Weeks later, a break-in at Sarah's apartment changed everything. She came home to find her door splintered, her TV gone, and Scout pacing anxiously, growling at the scent of an intruder. He hadn't barked to scare them off. He'd been too smart for that, but he'd stayed by the door, guarding what was left. That night, Sarah stared at Mike's card, then at Scout. "You want to be a hero, don't you?" she asked. He tilted his head as if to say, "If you're with me, yeah." Training wasn't easy. Scout was stubborn, playful, and hated the loud noises at first. Gunshots, sirens, chaos. But Sarah was there every step, cheering him on, her voice his anchor. She'd sit in the bleachers at the training field, hands clasped tight, watching him learn to track scents, tackle dummies, obey commands. He wasn't the biggest dog in the unit, but he was fast, fearless, and uncanny at finding what others missed. Mike called him a natural, Sarah called him hers. 2 years later, Scout graduated as a certified police dog, badge and all. Sarah stood in the crowd at the ceremony, tears streaking her face, as he trotted up to her in his crisp K9 vest. She knelt down, burying her face in his fur. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. He licked her cheek, and the crowd cheered. Scout's first big case came 6 months later. A missing child, a 5-year-old girl named Lily, who'd wandered off during a family picnic. The search had stretched into the night, hope dwindling as the temperature dropped. Scout and Mike were called in, and Sarah tagged along, her heart in her throat. She watched as Scout sniffed Lily's sweater, his nose twitching, then bolted into the woods, Mike and Sarah scrambling to keep up. He didn't hesitate, didn't falter, weaving through trees and over streams until he stopped at a hollow log. There she was, curled up, shivering, but alive. Lily's parents sobbed as they hugged her, and Mike clapped Scout on the back. "Good boy!" But Scout trotted straight to Sarah, pressing his head against her leg. She dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around him. "You're a hero," she choked out. The local paper ran the story. "Rescue Dog Saves Child." Scout's picture was everywhere, his amber eyes shining. He became a legend after that, busting drug rings, finding lost hikers, even tackling an armed suspect who'd fled into an abandoned warehouse. Sarah's apartment walls filled with clippings and awards, but she never stopped seeing him as the weak puppy she'd carried home. Every night, he'd curl up beside her, his warmth a reminder of how far they'd come together. And then, one crisp April evening in 2025, everything changed again. Sarah was walking Scout near the river when he froze, ears pricked, a low growl rumbling in his throat. She frowned. "What is it, bud?" Before she could react, he lunged, yanking the leash from her hand. He sprinted toward the water, barking furiously, and Sarah ran after him, panic clawing at her chest. She saw it then, a toddler, no more than 2, teetering on the riverbank, his mother screaming from a distance as he slipped toward the current. Scout didn't hesitate. He plunged into the icy water, jaws clamping gently around the boy's jacket, dragging him back to shore just as the mother reached them. The child coughed, cried, but he was safe. The mother collapsed, clutching her son, sobbing, "Thank you, thank you." Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank to the ground, pulling Scout into her arms. His fur was soaked, his body trembling, but his eyes glowed with that same fierce spark she'd seen all those years ago. Word spread fast. The town hailed Scout as their guardian, their miracle. A statue went up in the park, a bronze Scout, head high, ears alert, dedicated to the dog who never gave up. At the unveiling, Sarah stood beside him, her hand on his back, her voice breaking as she spoke to the crowd. He was left to die once, but he chose to live and to save others. That's who he is. That night, as they lay on the couch, Scout's gray muzzle resting on her lap, Sarah traced the scars on his ears from his puppy days. He was older now, slower, but his spirit burned bright. "You're my hero, Scout," she whispered. He sighed, content, and closed his eyes. And then, in the quiet, Sarah smiled, because she knew their story wasn't over. Not yet. There were more lives to touch, more battles to fight, and a bond that nothing, not even time, could break. Like a video and subscribe to my channel, please. Thanks for watching.